Yeah, let's get started. Thanks everybody for coming. It's great to see a few new faces. It's the Argo Workflows and Events Community Meeting. Last time we met was in July, so excited to reconvene here. Quick agenda. We'll talk about ArgoCon and KubeCon. Schedule is out. Hope to see folks in Chicago if you can make it. Things are booking up, so definitely look into making arrangements ASAP if you can. We'll talk a little bit about the v3.5 release that we've been planning. And then we have one community presentation today from Rafael at Logically.ai. So excited for that. On the ArgoCon side, if I go into our community doc here, I just listed out all the talks that are accepted related to Argo workflows. So definitely check those out, mark them on your calendars if you're attending. And we have quite a few talks from contributors and end users. Altan does great work with Argo workflows. Salesforce is a new, I think, user of Argo workflows. Dino Therapeutics PipeKit, longtime users. And then a few other interesting talks related to using virtual clusters here with the founders at Loft. And then, yeah, we were just talking earlier about Julie's talk, doing that with Alan on our team at PipeKit related to big data workflows and memoization. And then we have a bunch of other cool talks here, lightning talks. Shout out to JM from Procore for a community talk. We do need more PRs. So yeah, hopefully everybody can watch that one. And then there's also a few talks that got into the main track at KubeCon. So yeah, great to see. Terry, you got a talk here. Do you want to maybe give a quick sneak peek of what's to come in your talk?
You'll find out in KubeCon.
It's a
All
highly
right.
secret.
Nice. Love
And,
it.
creating a curiosity to people to come to the talk.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, check
Yeah.
out the abstract there. I think that one's on Thursday. Looking forward to seeing that. And then there's another Argo Workflows talk in another co-located event called AppDevCon. So I guess if you do attend ArgoCon, you get access to all of the other co-located conferences. So that's one fun thing to note about how ArgoCon works. And yeah, we'll look to see you there. Should be another record-breaking attendance for ArgoCon like it was in Europe this year. It was the largest co-located event and hundreds of people attending each talk. So yeah, sign up quickly if you haven't yet. Any other announcements related to ArgoCon or KubeCon? Cool. Great. Next, quick announcement is there is a release candidate for 3.5 out. Thank you, Terry, for leading up the release process here. A bunch of exciting features on that. I think there's also a blog post Terry wrote on that front. I guess it's 3.5. Trying to remember. Yeah. I'll have to find it here. Forgot to pull it up. There we go. Thank you, history. Make sure to check that out. A lot of UI enhancements and then some important workflow template fixes and improvements and some controller enhancements as well. So shout out to everybody on the call who's contributed to that. Terry, Bala, Julie, see you both here. And JM, I think you're up here too, on the UI side. So really awesome. Glad we can get these going. And on as far as the release can go ahead.
By the way,
Yeah.
I updated this blog post right before the meeting to include
great.
all the features in RC2 as well.
Nice. That's great. Is that at the bottom or just in line here?
Should be in each section.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Nice. That's awesome. Thanks, Terry. So that is one thing to note. With the release candidate, there will be an RC2 coming out soon. Do we have a rough estimate for that yet?
Should be available today. We just need to wait for the GitHub Action workflow to finish. So
Oh, awesome.
the
That's
tag
great.
is available. So
Thanks.
yeah, if you click the tags,
There it is. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Terry. That's exciting. Really great to see there. So at PipeKit, we've been using RC1 and noticed a lot of performance improvements, great UI fixes, and seems quite stable for us. We'll start to test with RC2 and encourage other folks to test on dev or staging if they can, just so that we can get more feedback on that. When it comes to the generally available release, we're thinking to expect that in October, after we just confirm RC2 is stable and we find any bugs related to those new features that were released on RC2. But yeah, really hope to get more testing and feedback, and then we'll be excited to release GA and talk about it with everybody at ArgoCon and KubeCon in November. Terry, do you have any other thoughts on or notes to share related to the release?
nothing on my end. Just wanna thank everybody who contributed to this release and testing and all the debugging discussions on GitHub. Those are really helpful.
Let's keep it up. Yeah, thanks everybody. And if you're on 3.4, quick note that there is a recent patch release for 3.4. You can find that here. Great. With that, I'd love to turn it over to Rafael for the community presentation covering how and why Logically uses Argo workflows for MLOps.
Thanks, Kaylan. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Yeah, so really happy to be here. This is my first community meeting. Here to talk about how and why Logically uses Argo workflows for MLOps. There's some quick introductions. Logically, I've been working here for about 9 months, and we develop AI-powered solutions that enable the analysts to identify harmful and manipulative content at scale in data that we ingest for them from social media platforms and other media sources. I'm Rafael. I'm a MLOps engineer. As I said, I've been here about 9 months, and I'm in the AI innovation team. We carry out short-term research projects, and I support the data scientists in the team by building them tools to speed up their ML experimentation. And I've led the adoption of Argo workflows in this team. So why did we choose to use Argo workflows? So there was definitely a need for some data pipelines when I first joined the team. Before I joined, a lot of the experiments were done manually on these kind of long-running VM instances that they would execute into. There wasn't any form of automation, parallelism, or auto-scaling. It's pretty inefficient all throughout. And there was also a need for these pipelines to be running on Kubernetes because we already use Kubernetes in our production environments to deploy these machine learning models. And we were chasing that operational symmetry. Kubernetes could also help resolve those problems I mentioned above. So why do we pick Argo workflows over alternative technologies? In this case, I'm comparing it to Airflow and Pachyderm. So Airflow was a tool that was already being considered when I joined Logically, and Pachyderm was a pipeline tool that I used in my previous company. So these are the main two that kind of weighed Argo workflows up against. And these are some kind of the main attributes of Argo workflows that were attractive to us. really liked being able to define pipelines declaratively. I was very familiar with YAML, and I've had some previous bad experience with writing pipelines in Python. So for me, it was I felt very comfortable writing Argo workflows. We also wanted something that was Kubernetes native, which Airflow isn't. But also, even though that Pachyderm is Kubernetes native, it also abstracted away a lot of it from us. And I like very much having kind of close control of Kubernetes, and Argo Workflows was really just felt like a natural extension to the existing API. And lastly, obviously, we wanted something open source. And when it comes to choosing new software to adopt, we use CNCF and the Linux Foundation as trusted sources. We often struggle to kind of justify what softwares to use in previous organizations, but we found that these two organizations are leading in the industry. So just talking about how we actually use Argo Workflows, as I mentioned, we use it just in my team, the AI innovation team. And me and another MLOps engineer will implement these Argo workflows. Mainly we'll work with workflow templates. These are generally kind of generic templates with pretty common use cases, but we also create bespoke templates on request, usually from the data scientists. All of our templates are stored on Git, and we use Argo CD to kind of deploy them automatically into our team cluster. These data scientists will then submit their own workflows using the workflow templates. At the moment, they're using the API directly, either using the Python request library, or we have also stood up some basic web apps that give them the forms to fill out with the inputs to the workflow and submits it for them. Some members of the team have also set up cron jobs, cron workflows based on one of our templates. I thought it'd be nice to highlight some of our favorite features of Argo. Definitely the workflow templates is probably the feature we've used the most, and it's really helped with the reusability and the modularity of our code. And I guess from the data scientist perspective, it abstracts away a lot of the complexities. They just have to worry about the input variables for the workflow, and they can start enabling it. They can start using it. A lot of the data scientists, their use cases can leverage the templates we write out of the box. They don't need to do anything else other than give the inputs. But obviously, more complicated workflows can kind of still make use of those templates that we've written and share those modules across multiple workflows. Another feature we really liked are the hardwired artifacts. Our ML training code usually kept on Git somewhere, and it's going to use some data from S3 as input. So being able to specify those artifacts in workflows, it's really convenient, and it's nice that you can also parameterize them in the workflow templates and make everything generic. The volume claim templates are also quite useful in our machine learning workflows because often a lot of kind of data artifacts get produced during the workflow and they get shared between steps. But once the workflow is complete, we can discard them, and these throwaway volumes are kind of perfect for that. And lastly, I'd like to mention the loops. They're really easy to just parallelize. If I have an existing workflow template that processes some kind of JSON data, if I want to run it on multiple JSON objects in parallel, it's very trivial and it lends itself well to the machine learning, to our machine learning models because they already have JSON inputs and outputs. Here are some examples of the workflow templates that we have in use in the team. These are probably the most popular ones. One on the left allows the data scientists kind of run inference on the models in parallel using two different technologies called MLflow and Seldon. MLflow is a platform for MLOps where they can save their models in like a standard format, whereas Seldon provides us a framework for deploying these models in Kubernetes. So this workflow, trying to summarize it here, is it will download the model from the MLflow registry into temporary volume. Argo will then create a Seldon deployment resource with the volume mounted on to its main container. While that Seldon deployment's initializing, a separate step in the workflow will download the input data and separate it into batches. If the sudden deployment stands up successfully, parallel workers will post the batched inputs to the inference endpoint, and all those results also get saved to the volume. And at the end, the results are all collected and saved as artifacts, and the sudden deployment is all destroyed, cleans up after itself completely. So this is used a lot when a data scientists develop a new model and they kind of receive requests from their stakeholders that they need to run, test a model on some data to kind of get some preliminary results. So this is quite useful for that. The other two workflows I mentioned here are quite simple. One of them enables data scientists just to run scripts with artifacts. So it will clone their Git repo for them, download the artifacts they need from S3, mount everything and kind of execute it inside their scripts inside the container. This is really basic, but it's incredibly popular. I think it, especially with our data scientists, that they can prototype quite rapidly. So keep pushing changes to a branch on Git, and then use this workflow to kind of run it in the cluster and see if things check out. Lastly, also, so this is less of a data scientist workflow, but this is something that we use for engineering. Is a Docker image workflow, builds one or more Docker files that were stored in one of our Git repos, builds that in parallel and pushes it to a registry. The long story short is that we were using Bitbucket pipelines before, but we found the features quite limited and couldn't serve our needs, so we decided to just roll our own workflow with Argo Workflows because we were adopting at the time. So there's a lot of future work. These are just some of the kind of main ones I wanted to highlight. Our adoption of the Argo workflows so far is quite limited, so there's a lot of room to grow. One of the areas I think is upskilling our data scientists to write their own workflows. I think it won't. At the moment, we're writing it for them, but I think that they should be able to do it themselves, and I think it will allow them to build way more complicated workflows because they're the subject matter experts here. However, they're usually most confident in a Python ecosystem, so we'll be considering using like a Python client library such as Hero. Haven't used it yet, but we'll report back our findings. We'd also like to start using Artifact Hub to store our workflow templates. They'll definitely provide a more robust way to version them. I think it would definitely make it easier to share the templates across different clusters. At the moment, we're working just in the one cluster, so it hasn't really been a problem. And we've got a pretty rudimentary way of versioning. We kind of bake the version number of the template into the template name in the manifest, which isn't very clean, but it's been working so far. But that's why we prefer something more mature like Artifact Hub for doing this. The next one, I think a really big one, is that we need to adopt Argo events. As I mentioned before, that our data scientists are kind of submitting these workflows via the API directly, and this doesn't scale very well. Argo events will definitely be necessary for kind of full automation and for just generally for us to mature our Argo setup. The last one is definitely a much longer term kind of goal, but it would be to adopt Argo workflows in the wider organization. So I mentioned that we're just using it in my team, and we're running it on a relatively small scale, so about 25 workflows per week. Argo could definitely be used on a much larger scale. I can already see applications in it for our data ingestion, how our models are orchestrated in production, and generally how we manage and automate our cloud infrastructure.
Can I find out more about the Argo Workflows API not scaling well? This is basically you have some sort of applications on the back end that are programmatically calling the REST API. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and also some of the data scientists will do it manually. They'll send a curl request. It's not a very mature setup. We think that we'd rather have Argo events, say listening to a message queue where they can kind of post their requests to instead. rather than
is it the
doing
manual aspect that they're doing now when you that you're thinking of when you say it doesn't
Yeah,
scale well?
that's right.
Okay.
And also, I guess in some way, it would be nice to start staggering those kind of requests as they come in, as we start rolling out across more teams. We don't want everyone hitting the server directly. I think, like I said before, like some sort of message queue system I pictured, I think would be quite useful.
And I guess that would have like automatic retries kind of built into the message queuing system that you could take advantage of that you can't take advantage of with an HTTP interface, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the clarification is that not performance of the API itself, but how to use the API. It was more the part that wasn't scaling well.
Yeah, sorry, I should have been more explicit, but that's right. But yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope it's been insightful. I know our use of Argo Workflows is pretty limited right now, but we're really happy with the results, and we've only really had positive feedback from the data scientists. So definitely looking to scale it up in the coming future.
Cool, this is helpful. Did you find that you needed to address like a bug or a feature and start getting into the code directly?
Not yet.
Okay.
We've been quite fortunate. But I'm a big fan of the project, and I definitely want to start helping out, contributing myself. So like I mentioned before, we work with MLflow, and that's quite a popular platform for MLOps. And I think definitely having some direct integrations with that to be able to pull in artifacts from their registries would be a feature I'd be interested in developing. But
Nice.
Yeah, that'll be in the future.
Okay.
I still don't know how. I don't know Golang yet, so that's on the to-do list.
It's
easy.
So for all the
Nice.
middle pointers. Yeah, Crenshaw also mentioned in the comments that potentially you could use plugins for this type of use case, like the automatically retrieving artifacts from MLflow.
I just see it.
Yeah, we'll share a link to the
Yeah.
plugins docs for you and maybe follow up. That's a good point.
Yeah,
I
thank
did
you
have
for that.
one question. I'm wondering if you know the Selden use case. So I have similar use cases on teams I work with, where yes, they will spin up a Selden deployment temporarily and then spin it down. And to me, it seemed like, oh, why don't you just run the binary directly run those all in parallel instead of having an HTTP server up. I don't know if you know the specific use case, because I'm curious to understand like why folks do this. I know one reason is that if you have a Selden server with your Selden DAG in there, you maybe don't want to rewrite that directly in like Python, but you want to instead just run the same exact logic.
I think probably for operational symmetry, so in our production environments, the models would be stood up as these servers receiving HTTP requests. So I think part of that workflows use case is also to profile the models as they're stood up.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, it's good to know. Yeah, because I've seen this use case a few times. And I'm like, there's a better way of doing this, but there's a potentially good reason for doing it. So that is, if you want to test the performance of your actual Selden server, that's a good reason to do it.
Yeah, the way you suggested will definitely be more efficient. I guess this was probably the way we had our models already in that format. So just continued working with them.
Yeah, well, yeah, and if you want to test specifically the performance of the server, the Selden server itself, you obviously have to run the Selden server then.
Yeah. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. Anybody else also wants to jump in, feel free. I guess you mentioned users have been happy so far. Yeah, like your end user data scientists and even other ML engineers. What have been the summary of the pros, the things they like, the things they dislike about Argo workflows so far?
Definitely the reusability of the workflows is was on the major positives. I guess from both the engineers, so speaking from the engineer's perspective, it makes my life a lot easier if my code can be easily reused. When I was previously using Pachyderm, there wasn't any means to, template. You'd have to start coming up with your own solutions, which is fine, but Argo Workflows gives it out the box, so this is always a much better experience. I guess from the data scientist perspective, they don't, like I said, it abstracts away so much for them if they only see it in terms of templates and their inputs. They don't even know there's a container and a Docker image running there somewhere. In terms of downsides, probably the learning curve, not as much for the engineers. I was already, comfortable developing in Kubernetes and writing YAML, but for our data scientists, I mentioned they probably prefer to work in a Python ecosystem. But I know there's solutions to that. We're going to look into using Hero and see if they like that. But also, I think a lot of people are just scared of YAML. But I think maybe they, if they get over their fear, maybe they would see it's actually often a lot easier just to, scribble that down than write something in a high level language.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there any specific, I guess, features they would be looking for, qualities they would be looking for in the Python SDK that you end up choosing for them?
I guess definitely the ability to make use of the workflow templates. I think that's an obvious one. And generally, I think we're looking for something that is quite concise. We want to avoid, excessive use of Python decorators and just I don't know if you guys seen sometimes like Airflow code can get pretty crazy with like all the cron configurations, and that definitely we would kind of want to avoid that sort of Airflow style of development.
Yeah, verbosity. Okay, makes sense. And I guess that's interesting around the concise aspect of it. That makes sense.
Because I think that's the main benefit of YAML is just being concise. To just declare things with as few characters as possible.
One other, I guess, question I had is like for the event-driven use cases you're mentioning, adopting Argo events. Could you maybe describe what sort of event-driven use cases you might have for Argo workflows?
So definitely in the limited cases where we have Argo workflows running our CI pipelines, we'd rather those be triggered by Argo events than through. Right now, it's kind of ugly that Bitbucket pipelines is calling out to Argo workflows. So ideally, we just have the Argo events webhook just kind of listening straight for that. But also, I also mentioned earlier having some sort of message queue. So in the idea that every time our data scientists submit a request to run a workflow to this queue, we want to stagger it to a limited set of GPU resources. So we'll have a pool of resources, and that message queue kind of just funnels everyone in slowly, and we can maybe make more efficient use of without letting everything scale out of control.
Yeah, makes sense. Could you maybe elaborate more on so folks understand like the more general use case of, you mentioned GPU, like what types of models or training jobs are you running?
So primarily we're training transformer models using PyTorch, and these will require some form of GPU acceleration. And at the moment, I mentioned that when data scientists were working on the kind of individual VMs, they would just kind of hold on to a GPU indefinitely, even if they weren't running experiments. So now we're thinking rather than having those, dedicated per person, we could have a node pool, like a pool of GPU resources, which Argo Workflows is running on. And access for data scientists will be through some sort of job queue where they can define the experiment they want to run. And this will be picked up by Argo events that will then trigger the workflows in the node pool.
Cool. Yeah, and you mentioned Bitbucket pipelines. I guess I've also heard someone recently looking to migrate off of that. I'm curious what specifically you mentioned, like features wise, what features were missing compared to Argo workflows, or what wasn't sufficient for your needs, and why now use Argo workflows instead of Bitbucket pipelines?
Definitely the lack of templating is a big missing feature. And in general, their pipelines are quite static. It's difficult to define quite dynamic pipelines. So at Logically, at least in our team, we use a monorepo setup, and we found it wasn't scaling well with Bitbucket pipelines. Whereas with Argo, we can kind of generate the steps dynamically in the workflow. It just suited way much better to our use case, I think.
Got it. You mean like parallelization of
Yeah,
steps?
parallelization,
Yeah.
but also I guess like I mentioned before, we can build multiple Docker images in parallel, but we don't want to necessarily build every image every time, only the ones that have changed in the most recent commit that it's operating on. And it was just much easier to do that in Argo Workflows than try and get Bitbucket pipelines to do it. Something else also, so we used Argo CD a lot, using their application sets, which can kind of generate deployments dynamically. We found that pairing really nice. That not only the Argo workflows could kind of build our images dynamically, we can then deploy those afterwards dynamically with Argo CD. So you can see
Yeah,
we're
more
trying to get,
complementary.
yeah, so we're really trying to, I'd love to adopt the entire Argo suite. Argo events will probably be the next one, and rollouts will come later on when we start coming closer to production. We start worrying about A/B testing and all those good things.
Yeah, canary deployments. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, really great to hear that it's been a success so far, and to the point you want to adopt more Argo tooling. We love to hear that in the Argo community. Yeah, well, thanks so much for putting this presentation together and being open about everything that's going on. It sounds like some exciting wins to come as well with Argo workflows and Argo events. And we're here to, I guess, engage and support with you and your team if any questions come up. So yeah, thanks for presenting today. Really appreciate it, Rafael.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and love the Argo project, and really happy to be part of this community.
Fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, we'll chat probably later too about how to get involved if you want to contribute more. Totally understand if Golang's new. We have folks who can at least guide you to easier contributions to start. So yeah, happy to do that. And I guess with that, we'll wrap up the community meeting here, but really appreciate you presenting and hope to see you next month.
Yeah, see you then.
Cool. Take care, guys.